So, hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation With. So, if you're joining us on Friday nights over on the Azurish Live channel, thanks so much for tuning in. Please do take part in the chat below. Don't forget to give the channel a like, a subscribe, and a follow. Obviously, you'll get notified next time we've got some live content going out. But equally, if you are watching this on the catch-up over on YouTube, please don't forget to click that like button and give us a subscribe. That'd be absolutely fantastic. Okay, so this episode's really a bit of a diversion away from the usual cloud tech conversations, and it's really about focusing on how we can all think about our own personal development and really understand how we can identify our own personal strengths and understand how we can harness the potential of our strengths effectively. So my next guest is a certified strengths coach who has founded her own business, who help both businesses and individuals. She's uber enthusiastic about helping people find their authentic potential. So on that note, I'm happy to introduce my next guest on In Conversation With is Emma Harvey-Pugh. Hi Emma, how are you doing?
Hey John, how are you? I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, I'm doing well as well. Thank you very much. Well, thanks for joining me.
Thanks
Obviously,
very
this is
much.
a bit of a diversion away from what I normally talk about on this channel, but equally, I think it's a very, very pertinent area, especially, from where I sit at the moment, working in technology, fast pace of change. And I know we had a catch up before, obviously, we recorded this session. So, before we go any further, I don't know if you just want to give yourself a little bit of an introduction, just to let people know what we're about to talk about.
Sure, absolutely. Well, hi everybody. Thank you for welcoming me into the world of Jonnychipz. Honest, as Johnny said, slight diversion from the normal tech content. But yeah, I have worked in the tech world myself, more on the commercial side, but I do appreciate a lot about the technical world and the types of roles that a lot of you, I'm sure, are working in today. I now have set up my own company, as John mentioned, which is focused around well-being and personal development. And I've done that because it's something that's really important to me. And it's part of a journey that I've taken myself as well, and kind of finding the techniques and tools that I have within my business now are things that have helped me personally. And like I say, I've just felt so passionate about them that I've kind of wanted to make sure that other people are finding the benefit of them as well. So yeah, that's kind of how I've got to where I am, and particularly what I focus on. As you mentioned, I work both with businesses and with individuals on both a professional and personal basis, and have two elements to my business. One which is around well-being in a broader spectrum, and that's in terms of individuals and businesses being able to get well-being reports, recommendations on how to improve their well-being, and kind of as part of that execution to improve well-being and personal development is the strengths coaching, something I was introduced to as a coachee myself, it was absolutely a game changer for me, not only in terms of how I looked at myself in the business environment of professional me and how I could be better in my day-to-day job, but actually also helped me massively with my mindset, my anxiety levels, all of these things about my own personal way of approaching life and day-to-day challenges and things. So yeah, and that's something we're going to talk about today, is particularly is the strengths coaching side of things.
No, absolutely. And that's fantastic, Em. I mean, that kind of sets the scene, like you say, for what we're about to delve into here. And I think when we originally spoke about this, it was really around, I was explaining to you that I'm sure we're no different. We're all the same, whether we work in tech or non-tech, but you're constantly in this, I don't know, sometimes you feel that you're in this world of, we have to constantly keep up with, with our peers and, for our business. And, I know there's some fantastic companies out there that absolutely do look after the mental health of their workers, but certainly in IT and tech, there's such a fast rate of change. And, it's not just about keeping up to date with your skill sets, but sometimes, personally, I sit back and I think, ooh, this is overwhelming. Which direction do I go? And I do sit back and think, how do you process these things? And like you say, that there are certain anxieties. And I guess until I spoke to you about it, I guess I didn't really understand how I could kind of quantify these things, or how I could understand how the strengths that I know I have, or I think I know I have, how they can play a part into, I know you use the word energize, which is a fantastic word, but how you can use your strengths to kind of motivate you and get you moving forward. But equally, how you can identify the things that maybe are holding you back a bit, which I found uber intriguing. Obviously when we had that chat and we went through this process, it was like a little bit of a revelation about how you can kind of fit these things together. So, I mean, on that note, Em, where should we start? Where should we jump in? Should we talk a bit about?
Yeah, I think maybe to start with, one thing is to pick up on what you've just mentioned there, is kind of what are your strengths? And I think particularly the like tech type roles, it's very easy to think about your strengths in terms of an actual task or an actual knowledge area, and really those things are things that you can learn. Anyone can learn how to do a task. Anyone can learn how to kind of recount and call back facts if you apply yourself in the right way to do it. Of course, not everyone's interested in kind of just like filtering facts and doing tasks. But and I think we had a conversation when we were going through a process. I'm sure you won't mind me sharing that you were saying, "Oh, I know why I enjoy coaching, because one of my energizers, your strengths, kind of lends me to following a coaching process, because the way you particularly like thinking about things." But I was like, well, actually somebody that doesn't have that strength would also lend themselves well to finding themselves in a coaching environment, because they don't have that as an energizer for them. And it's like everybody can drive themselves to the same task and get an outcome. It's just what energy you take with you. And so strengths, in the way that I talk about them, exactly as you said, are energizers. So it's things that come naturally to you, things that really get you in your zone. And I use many kind of analogies around this and examples, but I think about it in terms of something that energizes me is if I'm sat doing a task and someone's like, "Emma, it's lunchtime," or I finish in work and my husband's wanting us to have tea or anything, and I'm like, "Oh, hang on a minute, I'm just in the zone." And it's
Yeah.
whatever energy I'm bringing to that task I'm doing there, that's what's energizing me. And back to the point about well-being, why I find it so helpful for that is because when I'm in that zone, my mind's not thinking elsewhere. Whereas things that drain me, so it's not that I'm not good at them, but things that drain me, they're those things that are going to get pushed down and down and down my to-do list if I take the wrong energies with me to do them. So I think you've got there a slide that I'd sent across to you before. I think the second one that I'd
Yeah. So we'll jump over to the path of possibility.
Yeah, so the path of possibility. So this is what I was saying about getting yourself into that mindset of moving forward to get results. So if you're approaching a task that you've got on your to-do list with those energizers, like I mentioned, things that really get you into your zone, you're focusing on your strengths, you're finding opportunities and solutions, moving that on, then you're going to be opening up. You're going to be finding your positive emotions. Then you're actually going to find your energies. It's going to be energy boosting. And the results of that is you're really going to get that successful outcome that you're looking for. And it's going to bring confidence with that for you. If you look at that bottom line there, and you don't take the right energies with you, or again, another example, if you've got teams that you manage at work and you're having like annual reviews, quarterly review conversations with them, and you might very quickly scoot over all the good things that have happened and talk about, oh, we need to look at your development areas. If you look at that purely talking about it in terms of the weaknesses and the problems, that's very quickly going to take the conversation and the energy levels downhill. But if you're having a development conversation in terms of, okay, well, we need to develop this area, but actually things that really energize you, let's bring them into the equation of how to address those weaknesses, if you like, development areas. You can take that conversation up and leave it positively, as opposed to kind of draining of, oh, it's a big negative thing that we need to address.
Sure.
And as I say, your mindset as well is, when you're in that bottom line, it's very easy for your mind to start drifting off, because it's not things that are engaging you and capturing your interest. The top line is just, it's really playing with your heartstrings, if you like, those things that are natural to you.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so true though, Em, because I think before I spoke to you, I was, I would certainly sit here, and I guess I'm no different to the majority of people. Is that, you've articulated it, that sometimes you'll be working on something and you'll be in that zone, and it'll be a positive way of working. You're enjoying doing what you're doing, and you just want to get through to the end, and time almost doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But equally, there are times where you are sat faced arguably with the same task even, and some days it might be a struggle with whatever you do. It's almost like you've got that negative veneer over you. But I guess for me, it was, before I spoke to you, it was understanding what might be causing that and how you might look to turn that around, and using the the strength that you might have is such a, when you say it to somebody, it's like, yeah, of course, it's such an obvious answer. But I think until you get it explained to you, and you understand what your strengths are first and foremost, it's almost, I don't know, that was my experience. Does that make sense, Em? It's like,
absolutely.
Yeah, but
And
yeah, I mean,
like,
that's cool.
it is understanding, isn't it, how it works. If you just want to move on to the next slide that you've got there,
Yeah.
in terms of, this is how we look at your strengths in terms of a wheel. And so you have some things that are a lot more energizing to you than other things. And again, like I said before, it isn't about what you're good at or you're not. And the types of things we're looking at here might be something like strategic mindedness, it might be detail orientation, it might be results focused, it might be relationship building, collaboration. There's so many different kind of energies that are looked at within the wheel of this. And just because you've got a really tiny bar on there, that does it. And say that was, I don't know, results focus, for example, that doesn't mean that you are not good at delivering results. That just means, if you approach a task focusing purely on the results, you might find it a little bit more difficult to get going with that activity than if you approached it with a focus that was on one of those longer bars that you see on that wheel there.
Yeah.
And so it is about awareness, and like you say, just understanding those things and noticing. And I think it's really helpful as well to do an energy map. So just like, be aware as you're going through your week, what types of things are you working on? What are you feeling at the time? What kind of, how are you seeing people around you reacting to you? And kind of make note of those things. And you may find that actually, if you're doing an activity that is very results, maybe it's, you're at the end of a project and you're needing to finish it, you might find something as simple as, if you do that in the morning, you're more effective of doing that than in the morning than in the afternoon. Or if you've got a few tasks that you need to finish, again, let's suggest that the person we're talking about has results driven as a drainer to them, and all you're focusing on that day is the results driven stuff, and you're focusing on the results element of it, you're going to find that day very draining to you. So
Yeah.
it's really understanding then, what can you use from your other strengths and energizers to help you get through that. It may be that you can rearrange your time, like I said, so you're not having to deal with those tasks all at once. But maybe it is that you've got other things. Maybe you've got courage or enthusiasm as some of your particularly strong energizers, and actually your enthusiasm for the project will drive you over that finishing line, as opposed to you just concentrating on the results side of it. And so it really is that awareness of what you're bringing to a task, as opposed to what the task actually is.
Yeah, no, I mean I mean, as you're repeating that back to it, because I know you've told me about this before, Emma, and it kind of makes even more sense now as you're saying it, because I think to a lot of people these kind of ways of working out how you can work maybe are new. Maybe people haven't kind of looked into these kind of areas before now. And I think what I took out of our session when we went through this about my own personal strengths is that it's like you say there, it's just when you understand what they are, when you understand what your long bars on that particular wheel actually are, you look at it and you go, okay, yeah, that kind of resonates, that's me as a person. But then when you look at the shorter bars, which, like you say, they're not necessarily things that you aren't good at, but they kind of less they less infuse you. You prefer to look at things for the longer bars, like strategic mindedness or like you say, enthusiasm. And when I read back through the report, it was like, okay, right, that kind of makes sense, because I can almost pinpoint those times where I've had certain tasks that I need to do for work or even in my personal life, and I think, why am I finding that I'm not motivated to do that? And it's because like you say, maybe I'm thinking about doing that activity through a mindset that really doesn't enthuse me, doesn't make me feel motivated, and I just found it just really intriguing to begin with. I do like the whole psychology bit around things, and really how you get the best out of your working day and things like that. But I think sometimes actually understanding, right, how do you first analyze and assess what are your strengths, and then how do you kind of report on that and understand and read some form of report that will give you some indication as to what you might want to do in certain circumstances. And that's kind of the process that we went through, wasn't it, Emma?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, I always talk about it being like a DJ deck. That's as technical as I'm getting today, by the way.
Yeah.
DJ.
Yeah.
But it's about how you dial up and dial down your strengths, because in fact, a strength can be a big risk as well. So say, for example, enthusiasm. We talked about that before as potentially being an energizer, and in fact it's one of my energizers, one of my key 7. We look at the top 7 as our key 7. But if I'm bringing my enthusiasm too much to a task, that can be a negative in terms of my success because of how people interpret that. So a strength in overdrive, so taking enthusiasm in overdrive, I could become very overpowering to somebody if I don't kind of rein in a little bit and are aware of what I'm doing. Strategic mindedness, for example, if you're using that in overdrive, it could prevent somebody from actually executing an activity because they're too busy thinking about the bigger picture, and not about what they need to do to actually execute. Again, with detail orientation, if you've got both of those, there's going to be a risk, if you're focusing too much on those energizers, that you're not going to bring yourself to a point of execution. So then you need to start making sure that you've got the right levels on everything. Again, that's taking you back to awareness and practice, and just watching what you're doing and getting feedback from others. So part of the report, excuse me, which we actually went through on yourself as well, not only does it look at doing this wheel, and this wheel is actually the only strengths profile that's test registered with the British Psychological Society, so it's kind of highly recognized and used by over 80 of the FTSE 200 companies in the UK. So kind of a really well recognized approach to personal development. But there's also a 360 element to it, if you want to use that as well, which you chose to do yourself as well. And it's very interesting. I found interesting to get your thoughts on it as well, that the way that the questions are asked to the people that are asked to review you are again going on that positive path. So it's not giving them an open mic, so to speak, and potentially risking them coming back to talking about the negatives in the development areas, but it's focusing on, because you've already done your strengths profile, that it's then focusing on the things that are important in your strengths, and also how it calls out some of your key strengths and how they perceive you are utilizing them in your day-to-day life, and particularly in work if you're using this in a work environment. So that helps you to be aware as well whether other people perceive you're using those strengths well, or whether you're using them in overdrive, and potentially those strengths are tipping into kind of causing problems rather than bringing you success.
Yeah, I mean, there's a load of points that I wanted to pick up on. I mean, firstly, Emma, I think the point you raise about that, being a DJ and kind of fine tuning your strengths, because you're right. When you say it, again, it's one of those things that when you say it, it makes so much sense, because you can be super enthusiastic about a particular task. However, you can be over enthusiastic to the point, and I think that's what you're saying, isn't it? That you can be so enthusiastic that you don't actually get anything done, because you just I mean, I say it in a bit of a comical way, but you can just be uber enthusiastic and actually you miss the task that you're there to do, potentially. And I guess I can relate to that, because I can absolutely pick on parts where the strengths that were recognized when I went through this process. There have absolutely been times where I've, like critical thinking, that was one of my strengths when we did my report, was something that came out quite strong. And as an energizer for me, I like to think things through critically. But equally, there are times where I know full well I'm thinking about things too much, because I'm going overboard. I'm thinking about the nth degree. And it's just being able to recognize those points, isn't it? And just, I found, I mean, to pick you up then again about that 360 part. So what I felt about that is that effectively it's like a typical business, sort of your one-on-one with your line manager that you might have, and you look for feedback. Now, I know certainly the company I work for, they allow you to kind of put feedback forms out to colleagues and peers and any other people in the business to kind of get that kind of feedback. But from my understanding, it's not done in quite the same way as the 360, because like you say, then the questions are asked of the people that you nominate, which basically kind of shows you, it gives you that lens of what you feel about yourself and how you perceive yourself and how you are in your day-to-day working life. And it kind of gives that information in a question format to the people you've nominated, and they kind of position where they feel you are in those strengths. And you can kind of almost compare them, can't you? And I found that, to be honest, I think I said to you at the time, God, I wish I'd sent this out to a lot more people now. I picked my boss, who, let's face it, he can't be nasty to me, can he? But no, so I picked my boss, I picked a colleague, just to kind of go through the process and see. But I found it really interesting to come back. Like you say, it's something I think even in, like you say, within businesses, I don't think I've ever been or worked at a company that has used this process. And I just found it really intriguing when it came back. It's almost like having that one-to-one, but it's really giving you some valuable feedback, not just maybe the stuff that you want to hear, maybe your boss,
I think I found kind of in my corporate lifetime in various different organizations, everyone seems conditioned to feel like they need to pick out a fault in something that needs development and improvement. And that's not a bad thing, but it's like, do it in a positive way as well. And I think because so many of us, increasingly so, you hear of people who are feeling more and more worthless or lacking confidence, don't feel like they're performing enough, and even though they're showing up every day, they're giving their best, but every conversation they're having in their reviews and things, it's always about, but you need to do better and you need to do this, and that's fine, right? We all want to be pushing ourselves to be a better person. When no one's ever a finished article, there's always room for things. You and I are both very, very intrigued with personal development and how people operate and how we can improve ourselves. I just really want to champion this way of doing it in a positive way. And also it's the fact of working more efficiently. If you already have these natural energizers, these natural strengths, so these are things that are coming easily to you, then why wouldn't you take those energies to the places that you need development and work out how you can develop more efficiently with things that come naturally? and it seems so simple when you look at it that way, but when you step back and look at those two paths of conversations we talked about earlier in the conversation, the path of possibility and the path of negativity, I think there is just still so much naturally that people are drawn to that path of negativity, particularly
Mm.
in work conversations, and we can so easily turn that around.
It's so true, Em. I think it is so true, and it's certainly one of those things that I think I've learned myself over the last year. To be honest, I think I mean, when I speak to people around, again, using really massively generalist statements, but I've always had this view that generally people that work in tech are very cynical people. Generally techies have got that cynical, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but I mean that in the way that I think generally, if you're into technology, you've got that kind of inquisitive mind. And because you're kind of always looking to solve problems, I think it kind of lends yourself naturally to that kind of negative way. And, oh, that'll be, you're constantly having to think about what the problem is rather than what the opportunity is. Do you know what I mean? So I think for me, what the revelation was, certainly over the last year, and certainly when I spoke to you about this program, was that all of a sudden you've got almost this structure, which, look, I work in tech. I love structure. I love having a method and a plan to work to. And I think that's why it struck a chord with me, because, when you do sit there and, like you say, if you're drawn towards a negative slant of a conversation, it's almost like you're aware that you're doing that and you consciously kind of wind it back. I mean, and on that note, the other thing I was going to bring up is something that we hear a lot about, and it's such a true thing, but it's the idea of imposter syndrome. It's out there an awful lot. We know mental health is a huge there's a huge positive spin on mental health, rightly so, at the moment, that we all need to be checking on each other and looking out for each other. And I think those things do go hand in hand, because I think if you're nervous, you're worried, you've got certain anxieties, I think it's fair to say everybody has those things. But I guess some people have them in different, strengths, I guess, in different ways. And, this method of trying to identify what your strengths are, and the message of use your strengths to kind of counter those feelings of demotivation or anxiety. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? That's what I've picked up from it anyway.
Absolutely. Like I say, this is, for me, this is really where this whole thing resonated, probably even more than a personal development perspective from a professional side of things, was for my own mental health, my own confidence, and everything else has really, really benefited from this approach myself. And another thing that kind of one of those big buzzwords at the moment, or buzz phrases, is your authentic self. There's however many training things you go on, or if you're looking at how do I talk about myself on social media, it's always, oh, be authentic. And it's like, well, what is authentic? How do you know what your authentic self is? And I personally have not found anything that offers that to me any better than this strengths profiling, because, as like I say, it goes back to your energies, and this in a wheel shows you what your authentic self is.
Yeah, I mean, is it worth? I mean, I've got my output report. I don't know if there's anything confidential in there, Em. You'd have to tell me. But is it worth just
your report? You can do what you wish with it.
I mean, I'm an open book, to be honest. I don't mind people seeing. It'll just have arrogance. No, it won't. No, hopefully not. Anyway, hang on, let me call it up. So, I mean, I thought it was pretty cool, because this is the kind of. So, I mean, explain the process, Em. What did we go through? Rather than me explaining,
Okay,
what's the process?
So when we go into doing the strengths profile, the first thing that you'll do is you'll receive a like a multiple choice questionnaire. So if you've done something like an Insight, a Myers-Briggs, those types of kind of profiling, it's similar things to those. And therefore, in the background, what it's doing is it's creating your scores and everything's in your rankings. And then it's going to bring through this report, which John's sharing on the screen now, which is your own personal report around what your strengths and energizers are. So this is the report that you get. It goes into a bit of detail about generically kind of what the 24 different strengths are that that it's rated. But then it also gives you your specific wheel. And then from my perspective, the way that I work with that is then I would work with the coachee. So with John, when we went through this process, is we looked at his significant 7, looked to see how much of that John was kind of aware of and actively aware of, that he was using in different tasks where he'd seen successes with those before. And then we were looking at a specific goal that John was looking to drive towards, and how could we use these different strengths? What was potentially getting in the way of him achieving what the goal was that he had in mind, and also making sure that John understood kind of how these strengths, these energizers and drainers, could potentially kind of trip him up along the way, and how he could preempt that and overcome them in advance. And so the report, as we go down through that, will also then break out into more detail each of the 7 significant strengths, what they actually mean. So how can you use those to kind of their utmost to bring you success within your objectives, your goals that you're working towards. It might be a massive goal. It might be something that you're working on, a project at the minute, and there's a task within it that you're trying to overcome, and you keep getting stuck on it, and you want to know how to approach it. And then also we've got here these overdrive risks, which we talked about earlier. So it explains here, if you have common sense, is this one we're looking at on the screen, there are things. He's picking these out on purpose, right?
That was the first one. Do you know what I was going to say, nobody can ever tell me I don't have common sense. That was my first strength.
There you go. And now the world can see.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can I get a badge for it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just to take the top one. So spend time with your organization's customers to get hands-on knowledge of their experience, products and organizations, including feedback of what works, what doesn't, and use that to make practical recommendations. So that's where common sense really comes into its own. However, you overuse common sense. So you could have a tendency to dismiss new ideas. You could stifle creative and inspirational ideas. So that's that DJ deck coming into effect. And I think the overdrive risks is where others' observations and perceptions are really important to help you, because you might not always identify yourself that you're in overdrive.
It's like you say, that's the 360 part that we did, wasn't it, Em? So it's
exactly.
where, I might think I've got, loads of common sense, and I might think that I'm really applying it to the, really effective to do my job. However, when we put it out to colleagues or peers or whoever you want to, they give you their perception, which is, something that you take on board, which is, like I said earlier, it's not something I've seen in business before when you do this performance measuring and things like that, which I thought was pretty cool.
And
insightful.
It's interesting as well the way that it charts it in the report on the 360 side of things, because you've also answered the same questions yourself in that 360 process. So it marks on a graph what your average responder rating is against what your rating is. So when you start to see those not matching up, that's when you know that kind of there's some difference in perceptions there. And so that's where you start digging in to understand, is something not being used enough? Is it being used too much? And starting to understand that. And I find that kind of having a coach to go through this process with is really important. It was for me, because I think I could sit there and read this and take one thing from it, but until you actually sit and talk through with people, and so many times when I'm doing coaching sessions, that the coachee is kind of interpreted something one way in their head, within themselves, but when they've kind of externalized that and started verbalizing it and talking it through and thinking about it in terms of the report that they've just got, they start to see that, oh, okay, actually I was thinking that my issue was this, but actually now, as I'm applying it to this, and as we're talking out loud about it, and as I'm questioning them more about it, the realization comes through that it's actually something else that's holding them back. And it's a really interesting process. My
No,
favorite part of the coaching is having those light bulb moments. And I know when we talked, there are a few things that kind of weren't apparent to begin with to either of us, that
yeah.
as we went through the course of the conversation was like, oh yeah, actually I could do it this way, and that would turn things on its head a lot more.
It was funny. It was a little bit like a game of Tetris, when you've got all of these different parts of, your personality and how you
Yeah,
see yourself and how others see you. And they all come down, and then bit by bit, things, it all kind of fits into a line. And you think, right, okay, that kind of makes sense. And I mean, like I was saying earlier, it just, to me, it's almost like that. If like I always see it as there's that missing piece, that missing jigsaw piece that through my daily life, and maybe it's just me. I mean, I'm sure others feel this way, but maybe it's just me. But sometimes, no matter what you do, there seems to always be something not quite right. And I think for me, reading back through this report, I think this is almost like that missing jigsaw piece, because it's like it helps you process what you do, why you do it. Maybe did you find it really a positive experience, or did you find that there was something a little bit negative there? There was something holding you back, and that's what this kind of whole process has given me, to be honest, Emma. I think it's a really, it's just such an intriguing year that I don't think many people would turn to, because before I talked to you about it, I never really knew that this kind of thing was in existence, if that makes
yeah.
sense.
And I think as well, because there's so many, I've done lots of personality profiling through different roles that I've had in the past. And like I
Hmm.
said, you've got your Myers-Briggs, you've got your insights. They've all brought something to me, but I felt exactly the same as you, John, that I felt there was still something missing. Like insights was something I've done 2 or 3 times in my career of
Mm.
maybe a few years. And I found it so useful, and I understood, yes, I'm a detail person, and the other person that's in my team, they're very much more about emotions about things. And I think it helped me understand other people more than it
Mm.
helped me to understand me. It still didn't help me to unlock who I was. It was still
Hmm.
very much about tasks. And yeah, this for me has definitely been is on it, to say that it's been life changing is no underestimation of how
Mm.
important this process has been to me and in my life, and how I get up and represent myself every day. And we're not perfect, right? I don't have
Mm.
every day that I go through things applying this 100% accurately,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah,
aware and I practice things. And if I'm having a down day, or if I've got a to-do list where I keep seeing one thing keeps not getting done,
yeah.
I catch myself in that moment, and I now have the tools to be able to address that and to address it in a positive way.
Yeah, and to be honest, Emma, I think that's exactly what I took out of it. I think you summed it up really well there. For that's echoes exactly what I thought. Like I say, before I spoke with you about this, before we went through the process, and you took me through a coaching, a mentoring session. It was just, yeah, okay. It's it all started to fit in and make a little bit of sense. So I was pretty. I mean, is there anything else we can flick through this report now, Em, or should we flick back over to the slides? So I
I
think
think just back to this, I mean, what John's showing you now is all of his strengths, right? This is what he's trying to get across to everyone now.
I did I not slow
So
down? Look,
maybe that yeah.
no, I'm just
Last
seeing.
page there. Yeah, so this shows the 24 strengths that the report is looking at. So you see there, you've got your 4 different pillars. You've got emotional, relational, executional, thinking. Again, I can't reiterate this enough. That wheel isn't about whether you are good or bad at these things. This is
Hmm,
just about how energized you are when these things come into play within a task that you're working on. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I mean, there might be things there that you can look at in there and think, oh, that's definitely me, or but it is really interesting to get the report when you haven't had to think about it yourself. And like I say,
hmm,
so many people that I talk with, they think they're using one energy, but actually once we've dived into things and once we've got their report, we realize it's actually a slightly different energy that's in play, and at different volumes to what they potentially expected.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think I think I can't say enough positive things about the whole experience, because it's like I say, for me, it's just been that missing piece to help you understand, especially if you are a little bit like me. And one of my strengths is critical thinking, so I'm my own worst critic. I'll think about everything that I do, and was it good? Was it bad? Did I say the right thing? Did I say the wrong thing? Sometimes then one of my other strengths, which is courage, gets in the way, and I think I don't really care. If people, I'll put my opinion out there, and whether I get good things back, bad things back, I always like to think I'm doing it in a positive way. Others might not see that, but it's just such an intriguing way of looking at your own personality, and really what keeps you positively motivated, but
That's
equally
it.
what.
If you're
Yeah,
engaged in what you're doing. I know we didn't look at the stats earlier. We don't need to look at them, but
yeah,
it when you look at mental health, well-being, like these strengths, having these energizers in play, all of these things are going to keep you engaged with what you're doing, more successful,
mm,
and basically enjoying it as well. Like you
yeah,
don't want to be showing up to your work, to your personal life, not enjoying what you're doing. So if you can align yourself as much as possible to your strengths, let's be realistic, we're not going to be able to live in those zones 100%
mm,
of the time, 24/7. Things are going to come along the way, but at least if you know how to manage them, then yeah, you're going a long way to getting what you want out of your role, out of your life. And I think, just to go back to your point about imposter syndrome, if you're looking for a new job, which is often when people do get that imposter syndrome really dialing up with them, to know what qualities you can bring to a role, not just knowledge, not just experience, but what qualities, and be able to articulate it, even exactly using the commentary that's pre-printed for you within
mm,
this report, is really going to help you walk in, uh, find that job, apply for that job, walk into that interview, or in your current job, um, walk into your performance review and go, yeah, this is me, this is what I bring to this role. And not only do I bring it, but I bring it in spades, because it comes
mm,
naturally to me and I love doing things this way. So it definitely helps with that imposter syndrome, that kind of kind of drop in confidence that you might have. Even if you just sit there and read your report and remind yourself, yeah, I've got this.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how can we move forward with this, Sam? I mean, shall I flick over to the other slide deck now, and we'll
Yeah, by all
yeah.
means, please do. So I mean, there's things that you can do, that you can just take from your own observations of what's going on in your day-to-day life. So as you're looking ahead, I know this kind of says look ahead and look back, but look back in the last year, look at things that you've been successful with. And when I say successful, it doesn't have to be a massive project. It's not that you've gone out and, I don't know, done the biggest dynamics rollout in the country in the last 12 months. Yes, that's a massive success, but success is something that you have been happy with, you've enjoyed doing. It may be that you've had a conversation with someone, or a meeting, or you've learned something, but take something from what you've done last year and just try and think about, what were those strengths, like those 24 we were talking about before? What energies were with you at that time? Take those with you going forward and make sure you're limiting your risks. So the things that drain you, try and make sure you're not focusing on those draining energies, and try and take your strengths and make sure you're managing those. So dialing them up and dialing them down as appropriate, making sure that you don't go into overdrive. And then, really, from a wider development perspective, know your why. So think about you and your values and why you're doing something, and be realistic with the goals that you're setting yourself, and then doing it your way. So your authentic self, those energizers that are your true you, that's what you take to your tasks, your whys, and what you're doing. And look at those strengths and make sure that you're supercharging them to their most positive impact to what you're trying to achieve.
Emma, I think that's a fantastic way to kind of wrap up our conversation to a certain extent. I mean, if people want to reach out to you, I think we've got another slide here with some contact details for you.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, obviously from my point of view, I can't thank you, Emma, enough for kind of taking me through it and walking me through the whole process, because I absolutely have gotten quite a lot out of it. At the end of the day, it's helped me understand not just who I am as a person. I know it sounds very cliched, and I'm very well aware that sometimes when we talk this way, it sounds like, oh yeah, whatever, that kind of thing. That this is my cynical thing coming in again, but genuinely, it's helped me understand how what I do in my day-to-day life kind of fits in, and what has made me successful in certain areas, maybe not successful in certain areas, as equally. So yeah, I mean, there's your contact details, Em. Are there any last parting thoughts before we wrap up the call, do you think?
I don't think so. I hope everyone's enjoyed what we've spoken about today, and you've been able to take something from it. Like John said, if you wanted to get in touch, enthusiasm is one of my strengths. So I am very happy to talk about this subject to anybody, because I love talking about it. But no, thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and for John for inviting me. It's been lovely to talk through.
No, absolutely, and thank you again, Emma. I think yeah, we'll have to set up another coaching session when I'm failing. No,
And you won't be fading. You know how to do those dials.
no, absolutely no. It's been fantastic, really insightful, to be honest, Emma. I think hopefully people that are watching this now will get the same kind of thoughts and feelings that I had as I've gone through it and come out the other side of this session. It's like it's just given me such a different way of looking at my my day-to-day working life and how I get through it, to be honest, in an uber positive way. So thanks so much for joining me, and thanks for taking the time to have a chat about it, Em. It's been brilliant.
Thank you. Pleasure's all mine.
We'll catch up soon.
We will. Thank you. Bye.